Hello, everyone. Namaste, and welcome to a very special evening of Teak Talk with two very eminent yoga teachers, the leading lights of our time, and who share a common background, being lineage holders of their respective traditions. Dr. Kausthub Desikachar and Yogacharya Dr. Ananda Balayogi Bhavanani come together to share with us their journey so far from the other side and the challenges and questions they grapple with along the way. My name is Shailaja Menon, and I'm a yoga teacher based in Malaysia. As we would like the conversation to get underway, I'm just doing a very brief introduction of their respective parampara. Dr. Kausthub Desikachar is the grandson of Guruji T. Krishnamacharya, revered as the father of modern day yoga, and the son of Guruji T. K. V. Desikachar. The revival of modern day yoga is to a large extent attributed to Guruji Krishnamacharya and his legendary students, include Guruji B. K. Iyengar, Guruji Patabi Joyce, and Kausthub's own father, Guruji Desikachar. Guruji Desikachar went on to develop Viniyoga, a highly individualized approach to yoga that tailors the practice of each student's specific physical condition, emotional state, age, etc., using the tools of asana, pranayama, meditation, yoga philosophy, and Vedic chanting. Kausthub himself is a renowned yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and author, continuing the classical yoga tradition of his eminent grandfather, T. Krishnamacharya, and his father, T.K.V. Desikachar. Dr. Ananda is the son and successor of the internationally acclaimed yoga team of Yoga Maharishi Dr. Swami Gitananda Giri Guru Maharaj and Yoga Charini Ammaji Srimati Meenakshi Devi Bhavanani. When Swami Gitananda was 10 years old, his guru, the great Siddha and master Yoga Maharishi Swami Kanakananda Brigu, entered his life and he imbibed the great mystic sciences of yoga, tantra, and yantra from him. Known as the Lion of Pondicherry, he is considered one of the five leading exponents of classical Ashtanga yoga in the 20th century and hailed as the father of modern scientific yoga. Ammaji is the director and resident acharya of the International Center for Yoga Education and Research, ICYER, Ananda Ashram at Pondicherry. Dr. Ananda is currently the director of the Center for Yoga Therapy Education and Research and professor of yoga therapy at the Sri Balaji Vidyapeeth, Pondicherry. He is also chairman of ICYER at Ananda Ashram, Pondicherry, India, and Yoganjali Natyalayam, the premier institute of yoga, Carnatic music, and Bharatnatyam in Pondicherry. I know all of you are eagerly waiting to hear from them. So let's get this started. As always, please interact with us too with your questions and comments, and we look forward to hearing from you. So I invite Dr. Ananda to begin this most exciting and fun session with a chant.
Namaste and wonderful good afternoon and evening from this part of the world. And wherever we are, all over the world, we are in the present moment, the Atha, the present Kshana. So let's begin with mindfulness of this present moment that is bringing us all together. I invoke the illustrious Guru Parampara of my own tradition as well as all traditions. Tad paramparaye vidmahe jnanalingeshwaraya dhimahi tanno guruh prachodayate om. Akandamandalakaram vyaptam yena characharam tatpadam darshitam yena tasmai shri gurave namah. Ajnanatimirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshunmilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namah. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Gurudevo Maheshwara Gurudeva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah Hari Om.
Thank you, Ananda. That was wonderful. Namaste.
So we begin with the first question. How hard or how easy is it to grow up in a parampara? And what are the challenges and the blessings? So maybe since I see Kausthub here, you can go first.
I thought you will ask elders to go first. Ananda is elder to me by a few months.
Okay, so point noted.
No
I started the chanting, so Kausthub can start the answering.
Good.
Well
done. Thank you, Shailaja, for this wonderful question. And I really want to thank Ananda for agreeing to make this conversation, because a couple of weeks ago we were talking on WhatsApp and we were discussing about different topics personally, because we don't have so many people that we can talk to in a very open way. We can't put our burdens on our students. So we were talking with each other, and suddenly we thought of this idea that why not share it with the public, because these are topics that I think people should know. And so we decided to call this Teak Talk, which in Hindi, Teak means appropriate or correct, but it's also like a pun, because now TikTok is very controversial. So we thought we will use that title. So to answer your first question, I think it's one of the greatest blessings I consider, that I am born in a tradition of very great and illustrious teachers. And it is my prayer each day in the morning that I try my best to represent the great work they have done in as sincere manner as possible, so that even if more glory is not coming to the tradition, at least the glory that is in the tradition does not get depleted. So on one hand, it is a very, very great blessing. But on the other hand, it is a very, very big challenge, because sometimes I tell my students, because many students are quite nervous when the teacher is observing them. They are quite nervous when the teacher is observing them during the class of 1 hour or 2 hours. I say, now just imagine if you were being observed by your teacher 24 hours a day for almost 40 plus years of my life, because my father died about 5 years ago. So I have been observed by him for 40 years of my life, and very closely for about 35 plus years of my life, since the time I took my first breath. So that is a phenomenal challenge, because you're always under observation. There is no time where you are relaxing. Everything is a test. Everything is a test. Every moment is a test. So I never know when my father is actually joking as a family member, as a father, or when he's actually testing me as a guru, as a teacher. And so I have to be on high alert. And this has been a very big challenge on the one hand. And the second challenge I see is that with no matter if I declare many million times that I have limited abilities, that I'm not as great and as excellent as my teacher or my teacher's teacher, there's always the expectation in the eyes of the public that I have to be like my teacher, emulate my teacher. And this can be quite challenging, because my father is such a great personality, and I'm still very young. I'm only in my 40s, and many students, they don't know my father when he was in his 30s and 40s. They only know him later. So they expect me to be how my father was when he was 60 or 70, and that's quite challenging as well. These are two major challenges, I would say. And the third one, which is not necessarily a challenge, but also a little bit challenging, is the intensity of learning. We have to be ready to learn at any moment. See, with my students, I have a scheduled time for my class. Okay, 4 o'clock, we will meet on Friday or Saturday. We fix the time and then we show up and they show up. But living with my father, the class was at any time. When he has a mood, he will say, come, let's do the sutras, or come, let's do the yoga rahasya. Sometimes we are driving to buy some vegetables for the house, and in that moment, he is feeling inspired. He gives some classes. I have no pen and paper to write because I'm driving the car. And in those days, there was no mobile phones to record the video or the audio while driving the car. So this was to remember what he was saying and come back home and write it all down. That was yet another challenge. So I would stop with these three for now, because I'm sure you also want to hear what my dear brother Ananda has to say about being part of his tradition, what were his challenges growing up.
So beautiful to listen to you, Kausthub, because I echo many of the sentiments. Because the intensity, I think one of the greatest challenges when your parents are your gurus. And in my case, both my father and my mother have been my gurus. The intensity of life with them is so much that at times you are scared of getting burnt up. Because for my father, everything was important. Now, most people, live a life where they say, these are the things that are important, these are the things that are not important, and these are the things that are so important. For my father, there was nothing called so and nothing called not important. Everything was important. How you got up in the morning was as important as what you ate. How you talked to the sweeper was as important as how you talked to a legend in the field of yoga. For him, it was all important. And that is where he defined love as profound interest. It is a total state of dharana 24 hours a day, where you are 100% in what you are doing. Now, it is wonderful as a means of learning, because just as fire molds the gold into the ornament it becomes, the intensity is the fire that molds you. But the gold cannot say, oh my God, it is paining, it hurts. Whereas a human being, they say, oh my God, this is hurting. And there are times where, again, as Kausthub was pointing out, which part of him is working, which part of my mother is working? Is it the guru part or the mother part? Is it the guru part or the father part? Which is why I always make a statement that, especially with my mother, who has become sort of taken on my father's role after his passing in 1993, what I like to say is that as a guru shishya, I will never disagree with her. But as a mother's son, we have a lot of disagreements every day. And I think, where is this thin line where the parent is the guru and has to correct you as a teacher, as a guide, as a mentor? And where is that loving relationship of a parent and a child? I think this is a very big struggle, because you are going to learn. I often say I learned most of my learning by osmosis. Because as a young kid, my parents are teaching the student, I am running around the classroom, I am climbing the trees, I'm playing with the monkeys, I'm running around catching the deer and putting them back in the enclosure. But side by side, all of that wisdom by osmosis, higher concentration to lower concentration, was constantly coming. So I think this is something that people underestimate, because they think there has to be a classroom setting. And as Kausthub said, you are driving the car and you have a teaching. Where do you make the notes? Once I was composing a song coming back from Delhi, had nothing to write. I was on a Indigo flight. No, it was Jet Airways. I took out, the air sickness bag, tore it up, turned it reverse, and on the inside of an air sickness bag, I wrote a composition of Ma Ganga, Hey Gange Ma. And you start to improvise like that. You start to realize every moment is a learning. But it is a great blessing. And people, whenever they ask me, Dr. Ananda, Do you feel a great amount of stress, expectation? Do you feel burden on your shoulder? I say, as long as you realize how blessed and fortunate you are, there is no stress about it. As long as you realize you have the fortune, this opportunity to take the lineage forward, nothing is stressful because you realize you have been truly blessed by the universe.
Wonderful. Really lovely to hear your perspectives of growing up the way you both did, in your respective lineages. So this is the other question. Are you taught or treated any differently by your parents, compared to other students? Like, is it softer? Is it harder? Or your parents, they just treat you the same? So since you're here, Dr. Ananda, you can maybe answer the question.
I was just laughing at this question because, for my father, every student was dear to him. And I have imbibed that. For me, I don't find any favoritism between students. And the ones who want to learn, who are ready to learn, will learn. Those who are not ready, they will learn at their own speed. And that is why Patanjali is very clear. He says there is the Mridu Madhya Adhimatra, and then there is the Tivra Sambegin, who is the amazing student who will go so fast they will even surpass you and make you proud of them by surpassing you. So, you start to realize that. But I think one of the things I used to realize with my father was he was the lion of Pondicherry, okay? And a lion teaches its cub not in a sweet, soft manner. Swat away, paw. And so I got a lot of swats of the paw from my father. And I often say, because people say, oh, that's so bad, your father spanked you and you got hit by your father. I say, no, it was a teaching tool. When you realize that the parent and the teacher is with consciousness, with mindfulness, with the bigger perspective guiding you, you realize what the teaching is. So there is, I would say, maybe a bit more harshness in the teaching when it is your own parent, as opposed to the way they would say teach another student. Now, my father did a lot of egodectomies. He cut out people's egos without anesthesia. So painful egodectomy. If somebody was attached to something, he would cut that out of them threadbare. So he used to do it. So you can imagine what would have happened as someone who was 24 hours with him. You start to really, really learn what is this thing called asmita, what is this thing called ego. And I think that is one of the greatest teachings. And of course, my father's teaching to me was, the best one was, Ananda, you do not need to know everything in the universe, but you need to know where to look for it. And I tell you, that has really been the guiding light of my life, because he passed away in 1993 as I joined medical school. So I used to often think, oh, if he had been there, I would have come back and we would have had these intricate discussions on modern medicine and yoga and blah, blah, blah. And he's not there, he escaped. And then I realized he had already given me the methodology of how to find the answers. And the moment you have that, you just have to open. It's like everything is in the shelf in the library. You have to know in which section, which book is there, and automatically it is there. So I think this was one of the greatest teachings which he gave. And it wasn't in a classroom setting. This would have been while we were lying on the beach watching the full moon, or on the roof while he taught me about the Saptarishi Mandala, the constellation of the stars. Or he would be sitting listening to BBC. He loved the BBC evening news. And it would be around 9:30, 10 in India when that evening news would come, and he would listen to that. And I would be sitting there with him, and something would come up after that. And these are the moments that are such beautiful, teachable moments. Those are special moments.
Very nice. Kausthub?
So, again, I think I have to echo a lot of similarities. And you see, in Vedic tradition, there was one responsibility that every acharya had, which is to find the next person who will carry on the tradition And such students would be taught very, very differently with a lot of, like Ananda said, harshness or strictness, because the important thing was to basically ensure that the teaching quality did not disappear. And that is why he taught me very, very differently from even my sister, because in me he probably saw something that he expected me to do something, and this is also something very different. He taught me very, very differently from how he taught some of the other students as well, who were studying with him at that time, because he was training me to be the carrier of the tradition, just like he was trained by his father. He was taught very differently. That's why when you look at some of my grandfather students like BK Saingar or Patabi Joyce, they teach differently from my father because they only inherited a small part of the tradition. They were not taught everything about the tradition and in a very deep and in-depth manner. So definitely there has been a great difference in the way I have been taught by my father when compared to many of his other students. And sometimes he has taught me many things that he has never even taught to his other students. And he has also left a big container of notes, which I'm still going through now, which he wrote for me because he was telling me at one time that I'm doing all this because it will be there for you in the future when your mind will develop to understand what these are. At this moment, you don't understand. And it's very fascinating because I didn't quite get it so much at that time when he told me, because I was still in my 20s or something, because this was in about 2002, 2003. He had already started writing, and there's a huge container of notes that I have that nobody has ever seen. And then it came to mind when I saw the movie Iron Man Part 2, where the same thing happens where Tony Stark's father is leaving a video for him saying, well, you are now a young boy. One day the technology of your time will come where you will probably be able to figure out. And that's exactly what I am going through now. And that's why I feel very privileged, because the students who are studying with me now are getting better access to the teachings because I'm able to understand what he has left behind much, much better than what he has taught me personally, which was already different from what he has taught some of the other students. So some of the other students of my father, he taught some things to their limit, to their capacity, but he definitely treated me very differently. And I'm telling you, even he taught me very differently than my own sister. And that is very, very profound, because not all the children of a teacher is going to carry on the tradition. My grandfather had 6 children, but only one carried on the tradition. So it's not to be taken for granted that just because you are somebody's son, that this is going to happen. And this, I feel, is a great luxury and a privilege as well. But again, it's not been easy because Ananda used the metaphor of tiger and a cub. But my father used, I felt with my father, it was more like carbon and diamond. You see, carbon, I'm like carbon, very dull and dark headed, because my brain is not so smart like Ananda. Ananda is a gold medalist and all that. I'm just normal dosa. Ananda is special dosa. But the carbon has to be under pressure for a long time to become a diamond. And that is what my father did to me, was putting under so much pressure that I could somehow shine to the capacity that I'm shining now. And perhaps as time passes, maybe even better. So there is a difference in the way we were taught. And I'm so happy to hear that it's the same with Ananda.
I was also just thinking as you were talking, Kausthub, that this concept, everybody thinks that you just have to go for 1 month and get some knowledge. And they don't realize that the whole learning process is a lifelong process. And what you can be taught when you are 10 is different than what you can be taught then when you are 20, then when you are 50. And then what you learned when you were 10, 15, 20, when you become 50, 60, your perspective of that same knowledge is going to be different.
Correct.
And this is why this whole modern idea, you go to a teacher for a specified period of time, and then you are a certified yoga master or whatever it is so ridiculous, because, we are constantly growing, and that knowledge, that teaching, the methodology has to grow with us. Exactly. It is such a organic process.
Very nice and very interesting to hear from Kaustubh also that even all the children in the same family are not exactly same expectations not out of them, and the way they're treated or taught is also different. I think that's a very interesting point, because you would think that okay, you're all children of the same parent and you all inherit the same legacy, and maybe you should all be treated equally or taught equally. So the next question, I think I'm going to start with Kaustubh for this one. How have you handled the constant scrutiny by the public, both adulation and criticism? And how has yoga philosophy influenced the way you have met these challenges in your life?
I'm wondering why you asked me to answer this first. I think pun intended.
Because you have maybe had more challenges
Uh,
than Dr. Ananda.
I would not bet on that, but yeah, I think as time is evolving now that I'm in my 40s and I am maturing more and more, I see that now more and more I'm able to handle it much, much better. In the past, it was quite difficult because there were many people who were saying, "Oh, why are you not so perfect like your father?" And at some time, and those moments that would kind of a little bit disturb me. But nowadays, I am just telling them, well, you have not seen my father 24 hours a day, so you don't know whether he was perfect or not. In the classroom, maybe he is perfect to teach you, but he is also a normal human being. I also know him as a father. But also, I developed another strategy, and that was when somebody is asking me about, hey, why are you not so perfect like your father? I always ask them back, are you as good as your father or mother? I am a different person. I am not my father. And my father was not like his father. And my father's teaching is that we have to be true to ourselves. So this is what I've come to now in the last 10 years, I would say, because I've dealt with a lot of challenges and different circumstances that have not been easy, but they've been great learning experiences. And what I have learned in the last 10 years also is that I learned to put aside the adulations as well, because before this, there was a lot of people who were having some kind of adulations as well, and that would also affect me. But what I've learned in the last 10 years, and you know me as well, Shailaja, for some years now, is that I don't take neither adulation nor criticism to affect me, because I realized very strongly that if you allow adulations to affect you, then you are in some way allowing criticism to affect you, because adulation and criticisms are two sides of the same coin. So if somebody says something extraordinary or really nice about me, I say thank you very much, but I don't let that influence me. I just try to do my best. And if somebody says something criticism about me, I also do the same. I say, thank you very much. I take your criticism. I heard it, but let me digest it. And I don't really react the same way I probably would have reacted to either when I was in my 20s or early 30s. Life has taught me this, and this is where I am right now.
Dr. Ananda?
Kausthub sounds so wise when he's answering that question. I wish I could be half as wise in that regard. As a human being, it is much easier to take adulation than criticism. And this is just how we human beings are wired. And that is why the Bhagavad Gita to me is such a guiding star, because Krishna talks about the Sthita Prajna, someone who can take mana and apamana, praise and blame with equanimity. And I think same thing with Sukha and Dukkha. Sukha, Dukkha, mana, apamana. Can you take it with equipoise? And Rudyard Kipling talks about this in a very beautiful poem called If, where he tells it addressed to his son, basically, it's addressed to every human being. When you can treat success and failure the twin imposters the same. Beautiful concepts, because every human being on this planet who has lived from time immemorial has faced both success and failure, praise and gain. Yet when it comes to us, we think nobody else has been blamed as much as us. This is how the ego sort of perceives it. And when you are young, it can hurt a lot. And even the other day, I was talking to my mother about it, because I was just remembering some of the allegations that people used to make about us, the negativities that used to be said about us, when none of it was true. And I said, the way people perceive, because they will perceive as they are. So if somebody is a thief, he will not be able to understand you are not a thief, because that is his level of understanding. And that is why only the great-minded, open-minded people can understand other great-minded, open-minded people. And the higher can always understand the lower when it comes to consciousness. The more developed, that is why the Buddha could understand Angulimala. Angulimala was not in a position to understand Buddha. This is the grace. Now that is theoretical, philosophical. Let's come to some practical things. I have had my share of detractors, huge amount of admirers who support me, and I'm grateful to each and every one of them. Because for me, gratitude is the highest attitude. But then there have been people who, I remember about 25 years when I used to have these attacks. And it used to hurt me because they were attacking the basis of my conviction. My conviction was to spread yoga for the sake of yoga, not to propagate myself or even my own tradition. And yet they were attributing vested interests, ulterior motives to everything I was doing, criticizing unfounded half-truth. It is easy to negate an untruth, but a half-truth is very difficult to deal with, because it's so mixed up, you don't know what to say. Do you say yes or no? And that is why, will you get offended if I don't do this? And you're like, will you do it, but don't get offended? And you're like, which one do I answer? This is the type of situation. So it used to hurt me, and there was this person writing letter after letter, and I used to get hurt by it. Then suddenly what happened is, one day there was a change in consciousness. And that day what happened, I realized this person had been a God sent to help me become a better version of myself, was actually a manifestation of the Guru Tattva. And today, 25 years later, I attribute to that person the fact that I have hundreds and hundreds of publications, 25 books, 19 DVDs, huge amount of citation, which I may not have done if they had not made those allegations, if they had not made all that negativity, which I wanted to work out. So their allegation became, their stones that they threw at me became stepping stones for my own growth. And my best person in mind for that is Sachin Tendulkar, who said, let those stones become your stepping stones to success. And today I look back at those people who did that, and it was very interesting, because at one point I had great negativity. And then I realized that person had the same name as my father's mother, my paternal grandmother. And suddenly I said, my grandma has come back, incarnated, and is pushing me to become a better version of myself. And the moment that Pratipaksha Bhavanam came into my life, and I started looking at their negativity in a different perspective, it is like mathematics. Negative of negative becomes positive. But it's not easy, it hurts, and it's always going to be there in you. But if you understand, everyone who does good to you is helping you be what you can be. Everyone who does bad to you is giving you an opportunity to also be what you can be. So ultimately, the message is be yourself.
My father used to say, The dogs will keep barking, but the elephants should keep walking. Shailaja, back to you.
Yeah, so very beautifully said. I mean, it's also very interesting to know that both of you have faced so many challenges on so many fronts, personal as well as with regards to the yoga field. And it's wonderful to see the way you have approached it and used those challenges to grow and become the best persons that you can be. And the next question is really about how do you manage the financial pressures of running a traditional school, especially since many may expect that yoga must be taught free or very cheap?
I,
So let me go first, and then because I have very little to say, and then Ananda will be the next one to answer the next question first. I don't calculate financial things based on what people are expecting me to do. I base the financial calculations based on what I feel is my worth and what I feel the teaching is worth, because I am a professional. See, I'm not living in the time like my grandfather, where the Maharaja of Mysore was paying him a salary so he could teach the students for free. So he was not collecting the money from the students. We live in a different time now. And I don't think the Tamil Nadu government is ever going to give me 1 rupee for teaching yoga to the public. I don't think that it will happen in my lifetime. They may even take money from me to teach yoga to my students, but the reverse will never happen. So I cut out that noise, because how much something should cost is really dependent on what I feel is the value that I attribute to it. And that is the basis I use. I'm not really listening to the noise. My father told me one thing very profoundly many years ago. He would say, Kausthub, people don't have a problem with money. They have a problem with priority. They will always find the money for what is priority and what they value. And so I don't listen to any of these expectations. I just don't even respond. I do offer scholarships for people who cannot afford it, but that I do privately. That's all. I don't do it for everybody.
I think, we have seen both ends of the spectrum, because when my parents started teaching in Pondicherry in 1968, for the Western students who would come, my father said, you had to pay a certain amount as a base fee, and that has the story. But for all the Indian students, especially from Pondicherry, thousands of children, it was absolutely free. And this was subsidized by the fees that he got from the foreign students who were coming and studying. So it was sort of the foreign students who could afford it. That money was utilized to subsidize heavily thousands of kids coming on Sundays, free education, yoga, dance, music, swimming, playing around, mantras, puja. And during Christmas, the best students with the best attendance and performance would be given clothes, school books, and it was a social revolution. Free food for 1,000 people on Sundays, even before Tamil Nadu had the midday and meal scheme in schools. Even before that, my father brought in the scheme. Now, what happened is, we realized later that when you give things to people free, it is often not valued. And this was a very hard lesson, because you want to give it free, and then people think because it is free, it has no value, because we think that a shirt that has a tag of 100 is less than a shirt that has a tag of 1,000, even if made of the same material. We look at the price tags. And so when we upgraded this program into the city center, Yoganjali Natyalayam, what we did is we kept a base fee, very minimal even in those days, and still now also, where people had to pay that in order to come for the classes. It was like 75 rupees per month, 3 months or something like that. Very, very minimal. But the moment people started paying something, people started valuing it. And you got better gratitude, you got better respect, got better name in society, which is so ironical that thousands got it free and you were criticized. You start charging and you are appreciated. And it tells you again the quirk that is in the human mind. Now, even with charging people, because initially my father had this idea that let's give it to everyone free. So he started teaching the 6-month course in 1967-68. And he said, okay, fine. At the end of the course, you can offer what you want. Now, people stayed with us for 6 months. That is 6 months of accommodation, 3 times a day, food, teaching by my father personally. Every class he was teaching. Whenever we went to the beach, they would jump in his van, and his van, he had to push it to start. It would not start. So all the students are sitting inside. The guru is pushing the van to get it started and then going to the beach. At the end of 6 months, he wrote an article of what happened. One student gave 5 rupees, another gave 6 rupees, another one gave just 2 bananas. And what he had spent was like something like 1,000 times the amount of what came back when you gave people a chance to give. And that is why we started then having a minimum donation, a minimum fee. And we started to realize that you cannot trust human judgment of value because people are not capable of knowing what is value. But even now, yesterday I saw where an online course is being offered for about $4,000. $4,000 for an online course on yoga philosophy. And this is an intellectual property theft from Indian culture being done in the West and misuse of it. And I'm like, here, if you say pay 4,000 rupees, people are like, it's too costly. And people want to pay $4,000 for it. So what I start to realize is that do not leave it in people's hand because most people are incapable of knowing what value is. Now what we have started to do is that we say, this is the basic amount you need to pay. Then you let people talk to you. If they say, I am not able to pay it, you say, well, one is you could do it in installments. 2, here is the subsidy. And the third option, what I do is I say, now I'll allow you to pay. I will allow you to do the course, but you are going to promise me in your heart that you are going to pay when you can. And trust a little bit to the human being. But ultimately what we found is so many times as an institution, now as a person it is different because I'm paid by the university enough to at least manage my day-to-day expenses. But as an institution, there is always the danger of a negative bank balance where you as an individual are supporting the institution. And that is where you have to be careful that your model, like our model, doesn't become not just a non-profit, it becomes a loss-making unit, not profit-making or non-profit, loss-making unit, and you have to be careful of that. But what my father taught me in that also was, he said, Ananda, if your plans are in tune with the universe, the money will come from someplace. And to this day, I will tell you that whenever we have a plan made, even if that day the money is not in the bank, from out of the blue, either somebody will buy, a couple of dozens of books, or somebody will say, I'm going to bring a tour group. I don't know, it is amazing. So my thing is, trust the universe, have the intent, but at the same time, let people know that they need to put a value on the teachings. One way to value is by supporting the guru. It was always the duty of the shishya to support the guru, not the duty of the guru to support the shishya. And if you remember that, I think things will be fine.
We also did this experiment many years ago where my father decided one day that for whatever classes people will take, they would offer a donation that whatever they felt was right. And what we found was so fascinating because many people would come to take the class. And in our school, the cashier was at the entrance, at the front entrance. After the classrooms was behind, after taking the class, the students would run out from the behind to their car and run away to avoid paying the fee. And some of these people were people who do not have the money problem. it was very often the poorer people who would actually pay. That's why my father said it's about priority. It's not about the money. Money is never a problem. That's what the universe will always provide for everybody who needs
Yes,
what is their priority. That's what I meant by that. That's
very
what I
true.
meant.
I have seen that also. This thing is, it is never the people who don't have. It is the people who have who don't want to pay. It is in Yoga Anjali, we have seen this again and again. People who come from a very low socio-economic status, they will be the first to pay the fees. People who are well off, who have jewelry shops and huge businesses, and you have to remind them 3-4 times before they pay, and then they get mad at you. You think I won't pay? Why you are reminding me? I'm like, you haven't paid for 9 months. Huh? For 9 months you haven't paid, so I have to remind you. So, money is very, very tough. That is why in our institution, my brother-in-law, Mr. Shanmugam, he handles the cash part because I am horrible. Anybody comes to me, Dr. Ananda, this month I cannot pay. I say, okay. And then it ends up with everybody knows you go to Ananda, you can escape. So how we put it, you go to Mr. Shanmugam, who's a bit more tough nut to crack financially.
So I think very interesting conversation, and the takeaway is really that students have to start valuing the teaching, and it is the students' responsibility. It's always not a one-way street, and it is the students' responsibility also to value what the guru is offering, and to, from the generosity of their heart, to really as gratitude as well for what they have received, to pay the teachers as well. So I think that is something that needs to be acknowledged, because remember very similar thing, people talking about temples and pujaris also, about how pujaris are always expecting. And I was listening to, I don't know if you've heard of, there's somebody called Prema Pandurangan who talks on the Bhagavatam, and she was one day saying that, it is because we are not doing our part. Like, we have an obligation to support the pujaris, to give money, and when we don't do that, and when we are lacking in that, that's when the pujaris, we start complaining that they are expecting money. So it's the same way, if everybody does their part, then there's really no problem. And it's when students don't value what is being offered, then there is issue about teachers asking and high price, and all those issues come in. So, how does succession work in your tradition, and how do you handle it, and how do the students of your tradition handle it as well?
Anandam.
Dr. Ananda has a smile for everything. The answer to everything is a beautiful smile first.
Absolutely, absolutely. See, in our tradition, my father was the successor of two traditions. One is the Bhrigu Vamsa, the Bhrigu lineage, which comes to Kanakananda Bhrigu, and then the South Indian lineage, which comes through the Kamli Swami and the Shankaragiri, the Giri Dasanami part. Now, what we found is that when my father anointed me, and my father anointed me as a successor when I was 4 years of age, okay, long time ago. And many people had the idea, what does a 4-year-old kid know? And I remind them that I actually remember that day when the ceremony occurred. And when that ceremony was done, my hair was removed. And I often talk about a Ganesha temple being inaugurated the same day. But that has a statue of me with hair. And that day I didn't have any hair. So I always say it was very interesting. But it was a clear statement that Ananda is going to take over. But then, as a young kid running around, your father has all these students. And then, they are going out and teaching, and they have their students. And then suddenly, there's one point. Well, I had issues because when I was in my late teens in school, I thought I'm not going to have anything to do with yoga, and I'm going to go off and be an, engineer, architect. After reading Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, that Fountainhead nonsense got into my head, and I said I'm going to be an architect, like, rock and go out. And there was a year where my father was in class telling everyone, thousands of years of tradition, and my son is going to break it, because he wants to be the next Sunil Gavaskar and he wants to be an architect. I wanted to be Sunil Gavaskar's successor in those days, opening batsman modeled on Sunil Gavaskar. Now what happened is, so I didn't know my father was doing this in class. And I was coming home for holiday from school, and one by one I had all these students meeting me and, Ananda, you should continue this tradition. Ananda, this is important. I'm like, what's going on? And then it hit me. My father was going on this diatribe that my son is going to break this tradition and all that. And I remember Sri Bala from Australia, who, an elderly gentleman, Tamil Sri Lankan, settled in Melbourne, who gave me great advice at that time. And my principal in my school, who again put in perspective what my life could be and what it is. And I attribute to them the fact that I went through my entire teenage in about 1 year. So the terrible teens, I got it done in 1 year and realized how fortunate I am. So when I finished school, I wrote to my father, Swamiji, as I often refer to him always, Swamiji, I want to study with you. And he wrote back saying, Ananda, I'm so happy. And that is when he gifted me the step-by-step course autographed on the back of the book. He wrote upside down on the book like Shirsasana. And he was doing a Viparita Karani there itself in the book. Now, this was very clear and apparent. Okay, Ananda will take over. But then, when the time came to take over in 1993, luckily for me, my mother sort of buttressed it, because she was the link between my father's teaching and then me coming into the eminence. And to this day, I would like to thank most of the teachers of our tradition, many of them who knew my father, studied with my father, even before I was born. And when I travel the world, they come and they sit in front of me in the class and enjoy the class. And it is their magnanimity that sees my father through me. But still there are some for whom Ananda is that small kid. What does he know? I studied with his father, so I know more than him. There are a few of them, and all I tell them is that, as long as you can remember my father with fondness and gratitude, I am fine, because there are those who will see my father through me. There will be those who don't. It is their perspective, it is their choice. And that doesn't alter who I am. Because my father's teachings, my mother's teachings, his guru's teachings continue through what I'm doing. So I think here, for me, it has been a much easier route. But at the same time, I think we have to prove worthy of being the lineage holder. And sometimes people's minds are so fixed, no matter what you do, they don't want to accept it. And that's their business.
How about your children, Dr. Ananda? What is your hope for them?
See, my father was very clear in it. And that is why even before I completed schooling, I was made life chairman of our institute. So the letterhead had Ananda Balayogi Bhavanani as life chairman even before I left school. And when I was 15, he did that. Now that we have done a similar thing for my daughter, Divya Priya Bhavanani, that when she was 15, during our 50th anniversary of Ananda Ashram and 25th of Yoganjali, she was appointed officially with an appointment letter as Deputy Director of Yoganjali Natyalayam to make a statement that yes, there is a successor and yes, she will take it forward. Being the elder, she is expected to first take the journey, and the little guy has now become what we call Junior Madhadipati. So Kambli Swami Madam, where we have all the ritual activity for the last 5 years, Anandraj does the puja. In fact, during the COVID lockdown, he has been doing all the puja every Sunday for my father's Samadhi, Kambli Swami Samadhi, and he is an amazing Pandit. The Pandit genes of Devasena's family, Pandit genes are very strong in him. When he wears orange and does the puja, he is a saint. Other times he is different, but he is also growing into it. So what I would say is that it is not boy or girl. I think it is about them growing into the role. And because there are two of them, they'll have to share the burden, share the responsibility, and share the opportunity. Because she has the music, she has the dance. He is going to have the sporting activity. He's going to have the taekwondo. He has a different, he's a charmer. So he will bring that aspect into it. She'll bring her aspect. And hopefully between both of them, they'll take this forward. Definitely they'll take it
Wonderful.
forward.
Wonderful. Really nice listening to both your children and the way they're growing up and their different interests and how hopefully it'll all blend together and, take the lineage forward. So, Dr. Kausthub?
So, unlike Ananda, my father has not left any document at 4 years old that I will be a successor or anything like that. In our tradition, it works slightly differently. There is no like a public event, or there is no public announcement or something like that. We come from the tradition of Nathamuni. And in our tradition, the very important aspect is what is called prapatti, where we are honoring our the god of our family, but also the teachers of our lineage. So in the way that the tradition is handed from one generation to the other is very simple. We have something called the paduka of the teachers. So we have my grandfather's paduka, but my grandfather has his teacher's paduka that he worshipped all his life. That's a wooden paduka that we have. And my grandfather's paduka, my father made a silver paduka for my grandfather and asked my grandfather to do prana pratishtha and pass on all the powers to the paduka. That is, there is a proper procedure for that. And my grandfather gave those paduka of his own teacher and this to my father to take care. And that is the symbolic way that the teacher is saying, you are the successor of the tradition. And this is what my father did as well. When a few years ago, I think it was about 2007 or 2008, where he told me that I have to take care of the padukas of the teachers, which was his way of telling me that you are going to take care of this tradition. So even every day when I'm in India, I do the Paduka Puja for the two Acharyas, my grandfather and his own teacher. That is what we have. And when I'm not there, my mother is doing, and she is a wonderful person who is supporting me when I'm not there. And even before that, I think in the year 1995, my father passed on my grandfather's ring that my grandfather wore. So already before that, he had given a sign that this is what is going to happen. So in this way, there is this transition that is happening, but because there is not a public announcement or a ceremony or a document or this or that, it's not so clear to other people. We just do this. And like Ananda is saying, there are those students of my father who were very comfortable and very happy to embrace that I would continue the tradition. They have been very supportive of me till the current day, because they see that I am sincerely carrying on the tradition. And there are those people who have difficulty accepting in this, not because of the reason that Ananda is saying, oh, what the hell does he know? I know, I met his father and things like that. But for them, I think it is a much more of a financial interest. Because in some way, I think both, I could say this for both Ananda and myself, that we probably teach a bit better than some other people in the traditions. Because we've had that, like he said, osmosis of learning, where we have integrated a lot more things into our genetic structure just by being around these great teachers. So this, like many people feel like this is a threat in a competitive way, and that is why they have this difficulty and they try to create problems on a regular basis to undermine me so that somehow they can go up. But I have realized that you can never go up by pushing somebody down. If you go up by pushing somebody down, you will only find yourself under somebody else who is above you. So you have to elevate yourself to go up, and that is what I always wish for these people who try to push me down. And I continue teaching. So there has been difficulties, but there has also been great acceptance. And this is how we handle succession. And my father never forced me to take this tradition or anything like that. In fact, when I told my father that I want to study yoga and I want to learn this very seriously, actually the inspiration came from one of my university teachers who made me look at my tradition, because I also wanted to run away from the tradition as far as possible. And she told me, Kausthub, what the hell are you doing? Her name was Nirupama. She was a professor of economics in my university. And she said, look, go back to your tradition. So at that time, when I talked to my father actually said, no, you don't know how hard it's going to be for you. Are you sure? Don't think. And then he said, go around the world for 2.5 months to see what these people are doing, my students. Then you come and think about and decide. So I did all that, and then I somehow convinced my father, and he was convinced of my sincerity, and the journey began. So that is how it is. And I don't really think about succession or anything like that, because in my experience, what I feel is that my daughter is very, very young. And I don't even think whether it's going to be my daughter. Whoever will be the successor will appear at the right moment, and I will know what to do at that time. Because for me, right now, what I want my daughter to have is a childhood. That she is a child, she grows through that childhood with what teenagers of her age are doing. She is studying yoga with me, but I don't put anything else on her, any pressure on her. If she wants to come, she comes and learns. If she doesn't want to come, I just let her go. I don't want to put any pressure on her, any expectation on her, because I know from my tradition, which has come from 1200 years, that there can be gaps in the tradition, but the traditional teachings are never lost. So I feel that whoever will have to carry this will appear at the right time, and I will know what to do. Whether it is my children or my sister's children or somebody else's children, I don't worry about
I think that's
It's very
a
beautifully said.
beautiful way to approach that. And also, again, one approach we need to keep here is, though there may be a succession, a lineage, it is not that there are no other branches of the tree. Because when I think about so many of my father's students, in their own way, they have become his successor in their own way. There's no denying it. So the fact that I am his direct successor doesn't demean their efforts or their standing. And this is an approach that I have tried to bring in, because I would say, like in Italy, Swami Yogananda Giri, he has become my father's successor in a certain aspect of my father's teachings. Dr. John Mumford in Australia took the Yantra teachings forward, in fact, gave it back to me. He gave back to me the teachings he had got from my father and sort of completed a circle for me. Arunanatha Giri in South America has done his own work. Rajudev in North America. So what I feel is that, there are these beautiful branches of the tradition, but then there has to be a continuity, and that is why even our ashram in Italy, they always refer to their connection with the mother ashram. So this is the mother ashram that sustains their efforts, supports their efforts. So it is not a threat. And I think what Kausthub was saying is very true, because people, once they start thinking that, you are a threat to them, especially economically, then comes the rivalry, then comes the negative backbiting. So I think what is important here is that we are not a threat. They are also spreading the teachings. As long as the teachings are spread, as long as the acknowledgement to the tradition is given, and as long as they don't work against the tradition, I think the only thing that I would stand firm on here is, I don't accept if somebody trained in the tradition is working against the interest of the tradition. Then definitely I will rise up and say, as my father's successor, I feel you are doing wrong. That is a protection of the tradition. But somebody is teaching it and doing a good job, I'm going to be supporting them. I'm happy to support them.
So this is a very interesting question, the next one that's coming up. I think we're going to have a lot of really exciting answers. What is your vision for the future of yoga, especially in India? considering that the West is now trying to exert control over yoga through their various organizations. Yes, yes. I hope everybody notices that we're all dressed in the Indian national flag tricolor of saffron orange and green and white. So very patriotic Indian sitting here. So you can expect some fireworks.
I really wanted you to be in the middle, because then the color scheme would have been proper, because in Indian flag, white is in the middle. So I wonder.
Well,
how
in
that is
case
possible,
people
but
didn't make that connect, so that's why I brought it out.
anyway, I strongly feel that the future of yoga is going to be taking two different paths. There is going to be a divergence. The divergence is already happening. And there is one line that what I call the Barbie doll yoga, which is the approach taken by many of these Western institutions, where when you talk about yoga, it's always giving this impression of being in some spandex or sporting clothes with a yoga mat tucked on your back and like water bottle here and water bottle there. And it's going to be the exercise kind of yoga that is going to be dominated by the Western, let's say, organizations, like you have all these Yoga Alliance or the International Association of Yoga Therapy and all this. They are mostly focused only on the physical body and only what they consider measurable. And that means they are going to approach yoga in a materialistic way. But yoga is not a materialistic science, it's a spiritual science, because the central focus of yoga is prana, energy. And that is only going to be understood by the Eastern approach, like India or Asia, like China, Japan, and Korea, and things like this. And that's where I see that there is going to be a divergent approach that is coming, because that also is going to grow, because there is going to be a greater and greater interest in traditional yoga as a spiritual science, not as a materialistic science. And that divergence is going to happen, and it is already happening. And my feeling is at some point, India will have to make a choice that sits comfortably with its conscience of which direction that it wants to belong to, because it cannot be in both. And I feel that through traditional schools, that it's not just Ananda schools or my school, but we have a lot of traditional schools in India that are all part of the Indian Yoga Association, that I am very, very sure that we will make the right choice to move in the direction, to take the direction of yoga as a spiritual science. And there is going to be definitely a decoupling that will happen between the materialistic approach of yoga that is dominated now by Western yoga organizations. I don't want to say all Western people, but the Western yoga organizations controlled by memberships and money and this and that. That is very different from the approach that traditional Indians will take and the traditional Asians will understand as a spiritual science. And this decoupling is happening, and it will only become more and more obvious in the future. And each and every Indian yoga teacher will have to decide which direction they will go, because they cannot exist in both in the future. This is the point will come where even my dear friend Ananda has to choose which side on the fence he has to sit on, because the legs cannot spread as the walls are widening more and more. Namaste.
I think Kausthub has really given a beautiful perspective, because, you know, a beautiful statement from the poem is East and West is West, and the twain shall never meet. But I feel that they meet through yoga. And this is why I've often talked about it, written about it, that I have found amazing students in both the East and the West. And I like to say that so it is no longer East and West, it's more the spiritual and the material or the traditional and the non-traditional. This is how we look at it. And I like that Barbie doll yoga, because for me, I like to call it plastic yoga these days. So just as cash has become plastic, yoga has become plastic. So it looks like yoga, but it doesn't have the organic feel of yoga. The life is not there. And that is why gold, silver, clay, all of these have life in them. Plastic doesn't have life in it. And the tradition of yoga needs the life of yoga there. And I often joke that when religion got organized, God walked out. And when yoga gets organized, Mother Yoga walks out. So I believe that the yogic tradition is a tradition that has multiple diverse perspectives all coming together. I think it is very beautiful. And that is why the Indian motto, which is unity in diversity. Unity in diversity is what yoga is all about. Kausthub's tradition will have its own methodology. The SVSR tradition is different. The Yoga Institute is different. Kaivalya Dhamma, the Bihar School of Yoga, Baba Ramdev's tradition, Sri Sri's Art of Living tradition, Sadhguru's Isha Yoga, each will be different. But yet, yoga is the common thread that runs through it, unifying the diversity into unity. Now, the moment organization comes, organization is more interested in power, membership. So what we say is, oh, we are setting standards. We are standardizing yoga. This standardization of yoga itself is an oxymoron, because you cannot standardize yoga just as you cannot standardize human beings. Every human being is different. Every human being's requirements are different, physically, emotionally, socially, financially, spiritually. Same with yoga. So I think one of the issues we are looking at, and the Indian Yoga Association is going from strength to strength, especially during this pandemic. And all the living traditions of yoga in India coming together, I think this is a beautiful moment that has come, because for too long, we have been dependent on someone outside certifying us. And I think this is an old colonial hangover, that we always want a certification from abroad. So Vivekananda was not respected as long as he was in India. He had to go to USA and come back. American returned Vivekananda. Oh, Swami Vivekananda is great. And so that is why Kausthub and I have to go abroad and come back for people to say, okay, maybe these guys are something good. We have this colonial hangover. And the same thing, what has happened is that with organization. And the Western mindset is very good at organization, how to build membership, how to put in the way that once you get a membership into it, you cannot come out. They really make sure that happens. That has happened to yoga. Who is to set standards for yoga? The standards for yoga have to be set by traditional yoga institutions. By living traditions of yoga have to set the standards, not somebody who is a money-making based institution of so-called standards. And again, standardization is not the answer. You have to set standards. If I say this is my student, I should be certifying that they have a certain standard. Kausthub should certify from his institute, they have the standard we require. Kaivalya Dhamma will do it. Yoga Institute will do it. Why somebody else has to do it? Because each tradition is unique. Each tradition is marvelous and depth. So I think one thing we need to look at is, it is not about newer organizations. But I think we have to remember that it is not east or west, but it is that retain the core fundamental principle of yoga. Yoga has to be something that is for the individual. Yoga has to be something that will transform the individual. Yoga has to be something that will make the individual a better human being. That is the bottom line. Other things are all secondary.
That's why I talked about the divergence as the materialistic yoga and the spiritual yoga. And I don't talk about individual students, because even in India, we have materialistic yoga practitioners. And I have many students, and you have many students, and different schools have many students abroad also, who are very much fascinated by and who are very much in tune with the spiritual approach of yoga. And that's why there is a great future for yoga in that direction as well. But that decoupling will definitely happen between the materialistic approach and the spiritual approach. And this we cannot avoid, because the organizations that want to control the memberships and other things, they have become very strong in their memberships with a lot of, and they only offer membership. They don't offer anything else. They don't train, they don't certify, they don't do anything. They just collect money to put people on a registry. So people are just paying premium dollar to be on a registry. Yoga Alliance does not ever offer a yoga training program. IAYT does not offer any training program. They are just basically collecting money from people to put on their registry what somebody else is training for. So in some way, it can be equated to some form of thievery as well, because they're stealing money from other yoga schools to just get some people on the registry. And that's the materialistic approach, and some people are fascinated by that, and they will go. But there are enough people all over the world who also want to go to the spiritual path of yoga, and that is growing, and that is where the real yoga lies, and the real future of the valuable spiritual yoga will be there. And I think there's no doubt about it that this will also grow, because now we are living in an information era where people are becoming more and more aware of what is real and what is not real. And that is where we have the advantage, because we are living in a very connected era, in an information age where everything is out in the open. So, Shailaja, I hope you found your answer to this.
Yeah. I think that
Yeah, I mean, I think
the only thing I will add to that before Shailaja comes into it is that, the other extreme, like many people, they go to either this extreme or that extreme, where everything has to be regulated or nothing should be regulated. Now, the danger of not regulating is also there, because anybody can say they are a yoga teacher. Anybody can set up a studio. And then what is getting harmed? The spirit of yoga, the name of yoga. So this is why the Indian Yoga Association has positioned itself as a self-regulatory body. It is a self-regulatory body where we are coming together so that we can tell each other that, come on, buck up, come on, hold yourself together, come on, keep the real yoga in the yoga. So I think there is a good movement. I would say maybe a few more years we should see a good transformation. There may be a bit of polarization. The whole world is getting polarized in various ways. So there may be some polarization, but I think we need to stand for what we believe and keep moving on the right path.
so. Very interesting discussion with both of you about all this. So, I mean, from both of you, I agree with so many points that you all put forth. I also think it's not so much East versus West, as in people who follow the spiritual transformative path, and the people who, the plastic yoga, where yoga is purely seen as a form of physical exercise to, lengthen your hamstring or strengthen your core. So I think that is really going to be the divergence. And it's also a very important point about different traditions that exist in India, right? About how it's so important to know that like I've heard Dr. Ananda say once about how every tradition is unique, and every tradition has its own beauty, and you have to see whatever is being said in the context of that tradition, right? And in the context of that tradition, that will be correct. So it's important to respect the differences in tradition and to value each tradition for what it stands for. And because of that, it's very hard to standardize. I like that thing about, it's not about standardization, but really about setting standards, right? And like the teacher, when they certify you, when you certify a student, you realize that that student has reached that standard for them to be called your student, or to carry forward the teachings. So I think these are all important, very important points put forth.
See, one
Yes.
last thing I want to say about this point is, that's why I remind myself and all my students, I say, listen, as yoga teachers, we are not teaching asana. As yoga teachers, we are not teaching pranayama. As yoga teachers, we are not teaching mantras. As yoga teachers, we are not teaching meditation. As yoga teachers, we are actually teaching human beings. And that is what we need to remember, because we are not teachers of techniques. We are teachers of human beings, and there is an energetic transformation that will happen through the teaching, through the technique, and through everything, even the context. So that is why all these attempts to standardize will not work, because how can you standardize human beings? Even we are wearing different color clothes, we like different things, we live in different places, we live with different people. So we are not going to have the same thing. That's why whatever teaching must be appropriate to the human being that is receiving. And that is what these materialistic organizations are not trying to do, because they're trying to standardize things so that they can somehow control. They want to become the police of yoga. They are not going to become the teachers of yoga. They want to become the yoga police.
I think that's a very important point as well, that ultimately the yoga should be about transformation. Yeah. So it's not really, though different people come for different reasons. And, it's like a lot of people come for merely, physical. I have numerous requests from my studio about wanting to lose weight through yoga, because suddenly yoga is seen as a way to lose weight. But ultimately the practice is about, developing awareness, becoming more conscious, and also, and in that process we transform. Yeah. So that is something that we have to realize, and as yoga teachers, we have to also remember that as we teach. So what do you see the role of Indian yoga teachers such as yourselves in the world stage or the ocean of yoga, and what do you want your legacy to be? We've reached the last question already, so it's going to be a good one.
See,
Yes.
I think the highest standards have to be set by the yoga teachers from India, because India has given birth to this cultural tradition of yoga, a spiritual tradition of transformation and the manifestation of the highest human potential, which is divinity itself. So we have been gifted such an amazing diamond that we should not forget it and start selling potato chips. I think we have to remember that we have been gifted the diamond, and it is not a potato chip market where you can standardize what is the size of the potato chips. I think we need to realize our responsibility. The responsibility of an Indian yoga teacher. And when I say Indian, let me clarify a bit more. I don't mean just someone who was born in India and has an Indian passport. Yeah. Because I know many of our Western students who are more Indian often than our Indians themselves, because they have understood the depth of the culture. So there are many who actually have gone to such a depth that they really touch my heart through the depth of love, respect, and gratitude they have for the Indian culture. The moment you try to take Indian culture, Sanatana Dharma, Bharatiya Sanskriti out of yoga, you have taken the soul out of it. So I think we have to make sure that not a religious aspect, I'm not talking about religion, I am talking about spirituality, which has no boundaries. As I said in one of my sessions recently, yoga is spirituality without boundaries. Yoga is spirituality sans boundaries. As they say, medicine sans boundaries, like that. So we have the responsibility, which means, unlike Judas who sold Christ for those pieces of silver, we shouldn't sell our mother yoga tradition just for money. We should stand for the values. I think this is what I really expect out of yoga teachers in India, who value the Indian culture. Money will come on its own. Fame will come on its own. Name, fame, all of that will come on its own. Don't let go of your integrity, because yoga is all about being an integrated human being who says what they think and does what they say. In Tamil, I have a song, Sindai Sol Seyalum Ondrai, and that Sindai Sol Seyal, the thought, word, and deed have to come together. Otherwise, you are just another exercise coach. You are not a yoga teacher.
Correct. Very well said.
In
And what do you
Sanskrit-
want your legacy to be?
Oh,
There
sorry.
was another part to the question.
I think what we'll do, let Kausthub give his part of this, and then we'll come
Okay.
to legacy, because that's...
Okay.
So the talk that Ananda gave about the thought and the words to be together, there is a Sanskrit verse for this. Yan manasa dhyayati, tad vacha vadati, tad karmana karoti. What you feel is what you say, is what you do. So this is a part of our tradition and our integrity, and that is why I think truth, satyam means that. This is the definition of satyam, that there is an integrity with what you say, what you do, and what you act. As far as the thing about yoga's future and other things, I'm not so worried, because as I said, I don't need to think that any of us needs to save yoga. Yoga will save us. I don't believe that we need to do anything to save yoga. Yoga has sustained for 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years. We don't know exactly how long. We don't need to do anything that we are so desperate to save yoga. Yoga has the spiritual strength to save us. We don't need to save yoga. So that's the first part of that question. Now back to Ananda to talk about his legacy, because he has much more to leave behind than me, I think.
I remember many years ago, Ammaji, Swamaji, and I had gone to visit Sri Yogendra Ji at the Yoga Institute in Mumbai. And it's the oldest organized yoga institute in the world. That is, recently they concluded more than 100 years. And I still remember him saying to Ammaji, he said, "We must save yoga from mankind." It was a very interesting statement coming from Sri Yogendra Ji. So as Kausthub was saying, we don't have to, save yoga. It was interesting what he was saying. We have to save yoga from mankind, because he was already seeing what was happening with the warping, the mutation of yoga. But I agree with Kausthub that it is not, it is to think that I am going to save yoga is a big ego trip.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest ego trips, to think that we are the saviors of yoga, or only we know what yoga is. I think we have to take a step back. I think that more and more people are realizing that yoga is multidimensional. More and more people who have been exposed to the plastic yoga, Barbie doll yoga, Jada yoga, dead body yoga, they have started to realize there's something more. So there are people looking for it. And I am starting to see more and more young people. I interact with a lot of young people in the field of yoga, especially who come out of Kaivalya Dhamma or SVyasa Yoga University or the Dev Sanskriti or the Moraji Desai National Institute. And I'm seeing many, many dedicated young people coming out who have a passion for the depth of yoga and real yoga. So I see that, yes, there is a very good team getting built. So I don't think we have to be worried about it. But what worries me is that these big organizations, if they become too powerful, these young people may fall prey to the power, exerted by these big organizations, which is why the Indian Yoga Association, the government of India, has to take a stand in these things. As far as legacy goes, I think every student of mine, most of the time they are my teachers. I am not their teacher. But every student of mine who gets the spirit of yoga alive in them, and there are so many of them, I love them all equally. Each and every one in whom that spirit of yoga has been seeded, they are going to go flower, they are going to fruit, they are going to plant their seeds. And I think, well, I see a beautiful garden out there. I see a beautiful natural Vrindavan being created out there by each and every one of them. So I don't have a negative image at all regarding the future of yoga. But I think we cannot be blasé about it. We cannot be on the back foot and say, oh, everything will be fine. I think we have to do what we need to do right now, and that is stand up for yoga and let people know through us that yes, there is plastic yoga and there is real yoga, and you have to make a choice which one you want in your life. Do you want a living wife or a Barbie doll? You make the decision.
Very correct. Even recently, somebody was asking me, and I said there's a lot of onus on students as well to kind of, explore. And these days, the world is so connected through social media, and it is possible to have access to, very good learning and very good teaching. So a lot of onus on the student as well to explore and to really connect to, true teachers and true gurus, and not be taken in or by the limited version of yoga that is being offered as a form of exercise. So I think we've reached the end of this talk, and I hope all of you have enjoyed listening as much as I have enjoyed it, and just getting exposure to all to the whole journey that they have been through. And I'm sure, like Ananda said in the earlier advertisement when we were talking about today's event, that they're very young, and that's very true. And I think these wonderful teachers have a long way to go, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more from them in the coming years as they stand up for a real spiritual transformative yoga, right? So it's wonderful to hear you all and to know you all. So I'm going to ask Kausthub to do the closing chant for the session.
Good. Yeah, definitely I'll do the chant in a moment. I just have not answered your last part of the
question. I'm so sorry about the
legacy. I have a very simple legacy. I just want to lay some eggs. Because I often feel that, and I do feel this very, very deeply in my heart, that I am the last dinosaur. I am really the last dinosaur because I have been very privileged to learn with my father certain things that are only part of a tradition. And I talk about my tradition. So I'm kind of like the last dinosaur, and I don't want to be the last dinosaur. And I want to lay some eggs, which is basically in a metaphoric way to say, I want to pass on the tradition to some more students in the same traditional manner that I have learned, so that the tradition is alive into the future. That's all I want to say. I don't have any ambitious thing about myself. I just want the tradition to continue. That's all.
He is laying eggs. I'm planting seeds.
Yeah, because you are
very well said. Very well said.
You are. It's both the same because an egg is a seed.
Bija, the power of the bija.
Yeah, egg is the seed. Anyway, so basically, I will do the chant very soon to conclude, but I really want to thank Ananda for this conversation that when we were chatting on WhatsApp, that we will take it onto the Facebook. He talked about it. He accepted without any hesitation because these are some delicate topics that we are sharing from our intimate lives to the public, which is not always easy, and it's also risky because people may interpret it the way they want. So I want to thank you, Ananda, for accepting to do this conversation. And of course, when we wanted to make this kind of a talk, we needed a very good moderator. And since both Ananda and I are very friendly with Shailaja, we thought that she would be the best person. And I think, as I see from some of the comments, many people are congratulating you as well to have moderated this conversation so well. So I really want to thank you, my dear Shailaja, for this. We know each other for many years now, and so thank you so much for this. So, my dear friends, and I also want to thank all of you who have come to watch this show, TikTok, and we will conclude with a very simple peace chant so that all of us may leave this conversation in peace, in one piece. Om Shanno Mitra Varunah Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurokramaha Namo Brahmani Namaste Vayu Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ratam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmam Avatu Tadvaktaram Avatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram Shanti Shanti Shanti